review because I like to be able to see everyone. I believe that we do have the meeting recording this time, so we'll be able to refer back to it. And I'm trying my AI companion subscription for the first time, so hopefully we're going to get a transcript and some notes and maybe some action items if we have some of those. So prayers that that works out well. But this is my first time to use it, so we'll see. Okay, so did everyone receive the email with the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
So I wanted us to start out today discussing the memo from the SREC, the document that Kristen Bentley sent called Resolutions to Results, and then the legislative priorities report from the last convention. I wanted to kind of start off with those discussions and talk about, how we want to tackle forming and crafting these priorities. And I know that several of you have previously served, and so we're going to, lean heavily on your experience and suggestions. And I think I just want to kind of open up the floor and let people kind of give their thoughts or previous experiences of what did or did not work. And I also just want to make sure that we're being careful to give our experience without, denigrating or cutting anyone else down. We just want to, be able to use constructive criticism to have a good process as smooth as we can this time. So did anyone have any thoughts on the memo that we received from the SREC to start off with? I feel like we're kind of just free to talk. We don't necessarily have to raise our hands since we have just the committee on here this time. So if you had something you wanted to chime in on the memo from the SREC, go ahead.
This is Steve Bro. I'll break the ice a little bit.
Thanks.
I thought overall it was well written. I like the history. I'm new to the committee, so therefore, not knowing how this all rolls out a little bit, it was helpful to see it. And I don't know. It just was a nice historical view to me of what they did and how that ties to what we're going to roll into. I would say that probably a couple of these should roll off, and then hopefully we'll have some new ones. But that's what I got out of it. I'll leave it at that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I'm new. This is Paula McGee, and I'm from SD 26. I'm new to all of this as well. And so I sort of had I had a similar reaction to it, that I thought it was a very helpful historical perspective on it, and just helpful to see how the descriptions of these legislative priorities have kind of changed, but on a similar topic, but the language changed, and their input about the importance of the words that we choose. And I agreed that it seemed like some of these had been on here for several years with not much progress. So that was instructive as well, I thought. So anyway, overall, it was helpful for me to just understand how the work that we're going to do is fitting within this whole process. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
this is Ralph Feit from SD7, and I would echo what the previous speakers have said. I think this document's good for suggesting that we have broad headings for the legislative priorities. We got to remember that these were done before Trump was elected in 2024, and so it could be things like border security and other things, kind of we were under the Biden administration when some of those were put in. So I agree with the speakers that, we may think some other priorities have a lot more significance because some of these may have been handled at the federal level by President Trump and his leadership. So that would just be my comment in general.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yeah.
I think one of the points they made, I think we're going to need to keep in mind in everything we do, which is have points specific enough to guide legislation, but still broad and flexible enough to allow us to take advantage of, multiple pieces of legislation and evolving opportunities. Because what we produce here is just, the very first step in a long process, because then the RPT and SREC's LP committee takes up these priorities, and then they research hundreds of bills and they decide which bills match the priority and which ones don't, and then they go out and lobby and advocate for these, and based on what we give them, they're going to take positions on hundreds of bills, dozens of amendments. So we want to be, and this is always a challenge, and we're going to face this hundreds of times over this. Like, we want to be specific because we want certain outcomes, but at the same time, we don't want to bind the hands of RPT from supporting a good bill. So that's going to be a really tough challenge, and I'm not going to. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, but it's just something we're going to have to keep in mind throughout our work.
Yes, we want to be specifically flexible.
Exactly.
And do we have anyone in the committee who has served on an SREC subcommittee for LPs? I feel like we probably do. Yes. Okay. Rachel Hale, do you want to talk for a minute just about how you guys kind of approach something from a subcommittee point of view?
Okay. We definitely we set up the alerts, and then we get a list of the bills and go through, and we literally read them line by line. And some of them are, 80 plus pages long. And then we talk about them, and in each committee we'll have a list of, okay, we're going to go over these bills for this committee and see how they align to the priorities. I will say, I was on two this last time. I was on the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids, and then I was on the in federal overreach committee. And there were a lot that, when we would have to vote and try to take a vote to see if we felt like it, if we could pull any nugget out, if it would align at all. And a lot of it was, of course, I was interested in the transportation stuff and stopping the remote kill switch, and that we still haven't successfully done yet. And so some of that language didn't line up with some of the bills that we were seeing. And so, that was kind of an issue. But the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids, it was pretty straightforward. And then we would just take a vote as the committee on if we thought the bill aligned or not, and something that we either wanted to support or wanted to oppose. But you're looking at, it just depends on how many bills are filed. But we looked at hundreds of bills in each committee. And the Stop Federal Overreach, that one was it had so many things because it had the medical stuff in there. It had transportation. It had a lot of different things. So we were looking at tons of bills.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the End Federal Overreach was a Frankenstein LP. It was never intended as one LP, but, during the course of the ranking, the Convention LP Committee, we're trying to, have our list of 15. So, we'll just jam 2 or 3 LPs into one LP, and we'll call it End Federal Overreach. And that was how End Federal Overreach came to be. And I use that as a cautionary. Sometimes, we can fit multiple things under one LP. Other times, when you're trying to put, 2 totally unrelated topics and try to tie them together as one LP, it's going to present problems. And I think, looking back at some of the bills at the, that was a tricky LP and federal overreach. I mean, it dealt with medical freedom, which is a very good issue, transportation freedom, which is a very good issue, and then it just kind of jammed them together. So I think we need to be careful about that as we go about our work, because we're going to be tempted, because we have all these priorities and we have to cut them down to 15. And we're going to be tempted to jam unrelated issues in so we can get everything covered within those 15.
And that's just not possible, right? I mean, that is why we do have to get down to a limited number of priorities that is, realistic for our delegates to be able to get a handle on, and then vote them down to the 8. So I think just because we can make something fit under a topic doesn't mean that we necessarily should. So something definitely to be careful about. Dan, I think you had your hand up first.
Rolando's correct on that particular one. It totally changed shape in the last probably 2 hours of our meeting there as to what was crammed into that federal overreach. But the problem we have there, one of the issues I remember out of that is the only priorities we can give is stuff that our legislature can do. And too many times our folks at the convention want things done at a national level. And we don't have a mechanism to really do that currently. And that's why I've always fought for there should be in the presidential election years, there should be a set of legislative priorities that goes to the national convention. The national convention should do the same process to give our national leaders direction on what we expect to be done. And I think that's where Texas has been on the forefront of this for a while. And we're showing how, it gets a lot of things accomplished. We got a lot accomplished this last legislative session by how things were done. But Rolando's correct. We crammed a lot of things in that last piece of that. And a lot of that stuff was really more orientated towards the federal side of things and not so much that we could do in the state legislature. And I don't know a mechanism for helping fix that. And that's something that we have to be very cognizant of as we go through listing these priorities and things. If we can stay within what our legislature can do, I think we get more bang for the buck. It's sad that we don't have a mechanism to do stuff for the federal side of things.
All right. Let's see. Cindy, please.
Okay, just using the end federal overreach, for example, there was a bill that we've tried, I think, twice, that says, we have a 10th Amendment and the government's overstepping it. And so here's a system that Texas can use to say, oh, look here, you overstepped. And it was complicated, and it got a little less complicated last time. But like, I almost see that you could open this one like this up to say, that we do need a mechanism to state through our legislature and whatever other Supreme Court in Texas that something is federal overreach and that we're allowed to then decline it, which we are, but now we've got it codified in our own laws. And then you could do bullet points. Like, this could have simply just been 2 bullet points on 2 pretty important issues. And I think it would have been just as clear as the Stop Sexualizing Kids, which was a committee I was on. And it was, pretty easy to work those issues because we just had line items, and like, okay, this one does this. And this one's close. We can talk to the author and see if the author could make this one better. And so, the prescriptive nature of the bullet points, I find are really helpful for actually accomplishing. So, and that's where I think in federal overreach, 10th Amendment's one of the biggest things states, need to try to enforce. And so, so if we had done it with bullet points, I think it would have even looked clear, read clear, and they would have been able to, very, very clearly pick bills that fit. So if there were, because we could say no cars with kill switches can come into Texas. They tell us we can't because of interstate commerce clause, but California makes all kinds of rules for all their appliances, for everything they do. So, Texas could do that. That's it.
Certainly something to think about. All right, go ahead, Rachel.
Well, I agree with Cindy. I mean, I was so glad to see that in federal overreach because so many of our mandates and stuff are coming down from the federal government, and Texas should run Texas. But to her point, we didn't have enough bills that really addressed that. It didn't fit the overreach because it wasn't trying to stop the federal government and the 10th Amendment. And the reason why we were told we can't stop the kill switch is we don't manufacture enough vehicles in Texas. And so that has to be done at a federal level because we've been working on this issue since 22, I think, or 2022. So anyways, but I mean, it was good. It was so broad that it was hard to, so that's to her point, the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids, we had more defined things, and then you can measure. So like on border security, we didn't get anything done or it was not met. And then there was other ones that were only partially met or not met at all. And so I think it gives us a measuring stick to define, to see how if the legislator actually, we accomplished our stuff or we didn't.
Yeah, and I would love to get maybe some thoughts on why we think we didn't get those priorities met. Was it because representatives are just resistant to that topic? They just don't want that kind of legislation? Or is it because we were, something that we wrote into the priority, just some things that we could think about for feedback? I'm sorry, was it Cindy or Eileen first?
Cindy, did you have something else you wanted to say, or is your hand still up?
I forgot to take it down.
Okay, well, that's okay. Go ahead, Eileen.
I was just going to say I appreciate both Cindy's and Rachel's comments. Something we've been talking about too as a very active grassroots group in terms of pushing all the resolutions forward going into convention is to ensure that we're addressing root cause issues. It's so easy for us to get caught up in red meat, targeting the red meat issues, but solving the root problem and not necessarily dealing with symptoms and promoting bills that are addressing symptoms as opposed to getting to the root.
Do you have an example of that?
So, for example, you could say for, I also served on Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids. So I'm going to look at that one really quick. We didn't really actually, I felt like the language we used last session was very, very good. If you, instead of going after necessarily the books, let's say, for example, like if you're dealing with every school district and going after the books and you want to stop the books, how about if you amend the Miller test so that when an adult provides sexual content to a student, the statute or the standard in the law actually applies to that school worker and there's no wiggle room. There was no school liability, right, for sex crimes against students. And so create it. Instead of trying to maybe look at other ways to deal with the problem, go right to the root of it and solve that problem. Create the liability that's necessary to get the schools to wake up to the harm they're causing. So I think that's going to be important when we get to, Islamification or Sharia and other issues. It just, maybe just always be thinking in the back of your mind, is this language going to get to the root of this problem?
Right. So are we just covering up a symptom or are we actually getting to the root? Yeah, I like
Yes.
that.
And I think Cindy's 10th Amendment example is brilliant too for that reason.
Sure. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, good evening, everyone. A legislative priority that's happened a number of times is ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. I have to say that it's also tied to other priorities that we've had in the past, like school choice. The lobby from the school districts is overwhelming. I know we got something like an ESA, but it's not universal school choice. But banning taxpayer-funded lobbying has been there and has not gotten through, and there's a good reason for that, because our taxes are being used to lobby against us. And it's tied to, like I said, a priority like universal school choice, ending property tax. There's a lot of vested interest in ending, in keeping the property tax. So there are a lot of things tied together. It's not just one string and one priority. And that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you, guys.
Sure. I think that's a great example of one of those root causes. You know, taxpayer funded lobbying is a root cause of a lot of our other symptoms. So if we could figure out a way to get that one, that'd be great.
Thank you. We have a new champion on it, Hinojosa, Senator Hinojosa.
Yes, that's right. He is going to be taking that up.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead.
You know what? I have thought this for the last 2 sessions and the last 2 conventions. Honestly, education is 50% of the state's budget. If all we did was focus on ending taxpayer funded lobbying in education, every other city, town, county would get behind that in a heartbeat. And I bet you we would get that passed. But anyway, just an idea. It's a way to take a bite at that apple that gets at 50% of the state's budget, which there isn't another spending bucket that's quite that large. And it gives us an opportunity to maybe see some action on that.
All right, we've got about 7 minutes left on these 3 documents if we want to continue. So we had the memo from the SREC and then the document that Kristen Bentley submitted to us from resolutions to results. And I thought that one was really good to give, like you were saying earlier. I don't remember who was saying that about the kind of historical view and how some of those priorities have evolved over the last few conventions, the ones that have stayed on. And did anyone else have any kind of thoughts on that one or how we might use it to help us? Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, not trying to be a mic hog here. You know what? When I went through the priority or the resolutions and then looked at these ledge priorities, a lot of people put forward resolutions saying, keep the same resolution from last session and carry it forward. Let's just finish the work. And in some ways, it's good to see that people find, like, for example, stop sexualizing Texas kids. People still find that that's really important, and we would concur. On the other hand, if that's all we do, we're not taking into account, you know, the new things that develop. And so I would just caution where that happens a lot. We might need to think further than just bring up what we did last year. We do still have unfinished business, but I think new problems emerge and we have to address those too.
Yeah, I think we're going to be where the ballot propositions are going to come in, because I think we have a few topics on those ballot propositions that have not been items in the past that we certainly will give consideration to. Looking at the percentages of approval on those ballot propositions, there are some that are just no brainer, you know, that they have the support, they have the momentum behind them. Hopefully we're going to be able to find champions on those in the legislature to carry good bills forward that will get those solved, and we don't have to keep harping on the same topics over and over and over again. You know, that definitely can lead to burnout, not just for the people that are serving on the subcommittees, but, you know, just anyone who's actually involved. You know, you keep hearing the same thing and you get burned out if you don't see progress happening. So that might be something that we can consider during committee in our topics and what we're choosing, you know, not getting stuck in a rut.
Yeah, Rachel, and continuing along that line, my wife was in charge of Texas is Not for Sale last year on the SREC, and it was the only legislative priority that was actually given an award by Grassroots America of having accomplished all the bullet points that were actually assigned to it in that, you know, as it was written up 2 years ago. So you know, that may be an example of something that we were successful in that may create some room for something new to come aboard this year. And it was obviously a very, you know, China and Iran and North Korea trying to come in and buy Texas land and buy land next to airports and military installations and all that was a very key issue at that point in time. But these issues, of course, change over time. And, you know, I can tell you, sitting in the household, my wife was barraged by, you know, 4-letter words and everything from people who wanted her just to accept the bill as it was presented. And it was presented in a, you know, in a terrible manner originally with all kinds of loopholes. And for the SREC members that are assigned with these legislative priorities, they have to hold fast. They have to hold strong, because you will find all kinds of secret amendments that are hidden, that are added, you know, by reps and amendments later in the night. And it may be a beautiful bill, you know, at some 24-hour point, and 24 hours later, it's total garbage. So that's what the SREC members will be saddled with once they're assigned these legislative priorities. And it can be a great battle. And, you know, the lieutenant governor said, take it as it is, you know, and she was, you know, cursed. And she said, no, I stand for the delegates. I don't stand for the lieutenant governor. And that's what some of these SREC members have to do with great fortitude once our work is done and they're assigned with these priorities. So I thought that just might be helpful to the committee to understand just what a battle you will have with these 8 legislative priorities once they're established and actually turning them into law.
Definitely true. And when I ran into you guys the other night, she was telling me a little bit about, you know, what happened. And so she's supposed to be getting with me to give me the full scoop on, you know, how all of that played out. And so I'm very interested to hear how that went, because we all know there's a lot of behind the scenes things that go on, and it can get pretty ugly. Go ahead, Dan.
Ralph is correct on that one, but I might add one thing. In the committee itself, we had a lot of great testimony that helped us craft each one of those bullet points. And that's where a lot of the people doing testimony really helped out and helped defining that general deal of stop selling the land like that. And we'll see that this time, you know, in our committee. So that's why it's really important to give as much time as we can with those folks. And they've done that on almost all the issues in there. And as you get towards Wednesday, it really gets more focused down when you get down to like 30 of them. And that's all you're going to take testimony on, or those 30 items. That really helps us start to craft the actual language we use in there. And that's true on several of them that we had. So, you know, Ralph is correct, you know, from that, but I do remember that we had a lot of people testify on those that help us write those bullet points and add them to help craft that language as to the different pieces of it. And that gives the SREC members a lot more credibility and also ammunition to work with when they work with the legislatures to keep certain things in the legislation and get certain things out. So, I mean, it's very important that as we break things down, that we get that testimony out of the people there at the convention.
And that's a great segue, Dan, into our next topics here of discussion of rules for the committee, possible subcommittees, and the schedule. Go ahead, Rolando.
Oh, yes, thank you. And I was going to comment on the testimony and subcommittees. The testimony is very important, but we've already received the bulk of delegate input in the form of what we got from the county and SD conventions. And you know, just when you look at the topics that we got from the county and SD conventions, I think we already know we're going to have in the top 15. We already know we're going to have a property tax priority. We're going to have a Sharia. We're going to have immigration. election integrity. There's like 4 or 5 that, based on the resolutions we got from county SDs, that we already know that they're going to be in the top 15, and we can already start kind of working on the wording. But based on the overwhelming input we got from them, we already know that there's going to be certain 4 or 5, maybe 6 really important issues that we're going to have in the top 15. I would also refer everyone to the results. I think I don't know how to share it here. Maybe I'll share it in the Signal chat. The weighted results from the LP vote in the 24 convention. There's a couple interesting things to note. Of the top 15, what was the #1 top vote getter by far? It was border, by far. But not by far. I think election integrity was right up there as well. But what was the bottom at number 15? It was equal parenting. Now, you wouldn't have guessed that from the testimony, because we got tons of testimony on equal parenting. That's a very vocal group, and good for them. But at the same time, you have to weigh, all right, who's testifying, but also what input did we get from county and SD conventions? Another point to keep in mind, based on what we put forth to the convention to vote on, is the top 8 are the top highest percentages, not necessarily the top highest vote getters. For example, the number 8 LP that finished the 8th in the voting was End Federal Overreach. However, 3 other LPs, property tax, abolish abortion, and school choice, all got more yes votes than End Federal Overreach. However, those 3 also got more no votes. So they had a lower percentage than federal overreach. So just something to keep in mind. It's not always necessarily the most popular LPs that are going to make the cut. It's the ones that people object to the least. And there's a very fine distinction there. But yes, the main point I wanted to make was based on the feedback we've already gotten from county and SDs. I mean, we already know there's certain 5 or 6 issues that are going to have to be in the top 15. And I think we can already start working on wording for those. And maybe that's what we can do in the subcommittees.
Yep.
Thanks for that. Go ahead, Paul.
So the question becomes, are we going to have invited testimony? Or are we going to have a limited list of testimony items that they will be testifying on? Those are the 2 questions I think come to mind right now. Dan mentioned earlier about limiting testimony to our top 30 or 15 or whatever we have. Not sure I would endorse that. People are coming to testify, and are we going to deny them that right to testify? So I'm not sure what the answer is. I mentioned invited testimony. Do we want to do that? Last meeting we talked about, well, do we want to give priorities to politicians? Like Bob Hall, I'm sure will be there, and he'll want to say a few things. Do we give him a priority? Those are the questions as a committee we need to, I'd like to understand and come up with. Thank you.
Okay, good points, Paul. Thanks. Go ahead, Loretta.
I am not in favor of limiting any testimony. These people take off work to come and testify before our committee, and I think we need to give them the time to tell us what their issue is. And there may be something that comes up that we're not even aware of. So I'm not in favor of limiting any testimony.
I agree. And as the chair, I don't want to set that precedent that we are telling people they cannot testify about whatever the topic is that they are passionate about, that they care enough about, that they came to Houston and, made the time to do that. So as the chair, I'm not in favor of that whatsoever. Yes, we're going to have rules about, how many times you can, or your total amount of time and your time limit for each time that you do testify. But if you want to talk about sending another rocket ship to the moon, that's on you, right? If that's how you want to use your time, that's how you want to use your time. But yeah. So I think on that topic, we can move on. We're not going to limit We're not going to limit the topics. We're going to allow people to testify about the item that they want to testify about. I did send just a sample rules that I found from a previous committee. I've been going back and watching some of the previous convention committees working. And so I was able to find that copy of some rules. And so I wanted to see if anyone had any thoughts on those. I mean, they seem pretty generic, pretty standard.
Yeah, Rachel, I would make a motion that we adopt the rules that you sent out.
Okay, well, we can't make a motion in this meeting, I don't believe, but I think we can definitely have it in our back pocket. That's
Okay.
what we would like to do
I
when we
think they
do
were well written, yeah.
it in committee. Go ahead, Brian.
Delegates and alternates may testify on multiple topics, but may not speak for a total of more than 15 minutes. For all testimony, additional time may be moved by any committee member for a vote on the committee, by the committee, sorry. If you let, we had a problem with this last time. Somebody went up there and had 4 or 5 different things that they wanted to testify on.
Mhm.
And they took up a whole bunch of space and it gypped a whole bunch of people out of their time. They sign up to testify on one thing, then they use their 2 minutes, and then they go on. They can get back in line to retestify again, but I think that rule right there that I just read, I think we should modify it or strike it altogether. Probably modify it in delegates and alternates may testify on a topic at a time, not multiple topics.
Correct. No, I think you're correct. They can sign up, testify about their first item, or they can testify for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
They can go out and then they can get back in line. If there are people who have not had an opportunity to testify yet, those people will have priority. And then once we get through those people, then if you wish to testify again, I think then you may testify again, because we don't want people just, abusing
It
that.
just makes it fair for all.
Exactly. Yes. We want to give everyone the opportunity to testify who would like to testify. Debbie, did you have something?
Yeah, the only thing that I thought maybe we should add on here is we have a problem sometimes with people signing other people in, they're not there. And when people are waiting and they're there, that's just really unfair. So I think they have to be there in person to sign in themselves. That maybe might need to be in the rules somewhere.
Okay, that you must be in person and sign your own self up, that you may not sign in for someone else.
Yeah, worded well, but yeah, you can't sign in for other people.
Does anyone else have any opinions on this
I'm
matter?
wondering how we're gonna police that,
Hmm.
because they sign in while we're hearing testimony. So who's gonna, and on the delegates and alternates that can come and testify, who's policing that as well? How do we know that they're not just guests to the, because we're hearing testimony before we even get our credentials for the convention. I'm just wondering how we're gonna police it.
Good question. We have a working document for a sign-in sheet, and we will have a person, that is assigned to that sheet, but we will definitely need to figure out a way that we can enforce those rules. Let's see, who is next?
I think I am.
Yeah,
Cindy.
okay.
So I agree with Debbie about the not letting people sign in, and we could try to do that by having the person sitting with the clipboards or the sign-in sheet, just not allowing them to sign in more than once. They can't put them down and the person they're rooming with. But then I would ask can we make some kind of, we talked about it a bit, a carve out for somebody coming over from rules who's on the committee, and from platform who's on the committee, having a chance to come. Like I running an organization could not get myself a time at the microphone in priorities last time on any of our breaks, going over there on every single break. I couldn't find a way to get microphone time. And I would love to have a, not where they're running roughshod over everybody else, but some ability to let committee members on other committees come on an issue or two that they're really passionate about.
For me as a chair, I don't mind giving consideration to people who are serving on other committees. I think I said that previously, like we will have, if maybe I'm thinking that we would treat it the same as an elected official who wanted to schedule a certain time during testimony to come and speak. Maybe we could extend that same courtesy to our delegates who are serving on committee. I feel like that would be courteous.
And maybe ask the resolutions committee or rules committee to give us the same courtesy, if we're trying to run over to one of those committees on a break.
Yeah, certainly we can ask.
Yeah,
I mean,
ask them if they would do that. Yeah. Okay. Because we don't want to be missing, we're here for our district and we want to be there. But we want to use our time to get everything done, that our area wants us to do. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, it policed itself pretty well last time. I remember that we had people sign other people in, and if we came up, they didn't answer the rule, they didn't answer the call, we skipped over to the very next one. So it wasn't, we had that where people signed in last time for other people, but if they weren't there when it was their turn, they got 30 seconds and we just rolled.
Yeah.
And last time we also sent a text message over to the other committee chairs and told them, hey, you got from this time to this time to have your people over here if they want to testify. And that worked pretty well between everybody. All the committee chairs kind of swapped people during a certain period of time. It worked pretty well.
I was on platform and we never heard that we had that opportunity to come over.
That was on your committee chair, but
Okay.
we
Yeah.
had some come in because I was the timekeeper last time as well
Okay.
as the sergeant at arms. And we had other people come over from other committees. That was the chair's responsibility because I sent the text over to the other committees saying, hey, we got from this time to this time for your people to come over and testify if they want to. So.
Okay. All right, Dan, go ahead.
I was going to suggest that, is there a way we can get a manual roster of the delegates and alternates so that our sergeant at arms can have that? So as they're checking in, he can see that person. Because like was mentioned before, like on Monday and Tuesday, you probably won't have a lot of the credentials for people won't be available to them or we're signing in. But if they're at least on that list, we have a more than reasonable possibility that they are an actual delegate to the convention, and we can highlight them off. That'd be also a way to, as our sergeant at arms is checking them in and they're signing up to testify, we can see how many times they've come before the committee. If they've been yelled out a couple of times, you got some repeat individuals there, and getting up to the time limit that you had talked about earlier in the rules, which I think is a good one, and it worked fairly well in last time. So, but having that roster would be, I would think it'd be a good thing to have, and I think all the committees should have that somewhere.
Yes,
so that
well,
they can refer to it.
We have a note in the chat from Micah that the chairs will have a binder with delegates and alternates. So that information will certainly be available. And I don't think I would mind sharing that with someone who's going to be in charge of the list to peruse.
We only got really special invited testimony. Mainly it was the last day on Wednesday. And that's when Senator Bob Hall came in and talked about a couple of the different topics as to their perspective as legislatures, individuals on how to potentially word things that would help them get their stuff done in the legislature itself. And I found that very beneficial, to be honest
Right.
with you. So it's that last day where things get kind of controlled. Before that, it's kind of like it's a freewheeling circus in there this first day and a half.
No, we're not going to be a circus. We're going to have everything working in a beautiful symphony. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
In the past, some chairs have said if there's something you want to testify on and you don't get the opportunity, like Cindy was talking about, is to talk to your counterpart in that committee to advocate for what you want to say. So that's also another angle that has been talked about by the chairs. And so I just wanted to add that.
Okay, yeah, great thing to keep in mind as well. I do want us to touch on the possibility of using subcommittees. I know that last convention there were not subcommittees, but I believe the one before that there were. And I know that several of you have served when there have been and when there have not been. So I wanted to see if we can get a little bit of insight on that. And I'm willing to, entertain it. We kind of, as the committee, need to decide if that's something that we want to do or not.
Well, in the past, subcommittees have helped with wording, but usually not until we are permanent.
Okay. So, go ahead, Debbie.
And so I think it was convention before last, we did subcommittees right out of the gate. I think Nathan Macias was the chair at that time, or maybe it was 3 times ago. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it worked out really well to give deep discussion to some topics. And I think we were just better prepared as a group to talk about the specific items we talked about in small group. I really liked it.
Yeah, I feel like it could certainly have some merits in keeping, working in smaller groups and keeping on topic and on focus of, okay, these are my babies. This is what I'm working on, and not having to think about 30 topics rather than these are my 6 that I'm working on. But then, on the flip side of that, maybe there's someone in a different subcommittee who would have something great that they could add, but that's not to say that couldn't happen when we bring it to the entire group, to discuss, and then, their point could be added then. So I don't know. Anyone else want to chime in on the subcommittee? Yay or nay?
They could be beneficial, but we have to structure them to where they're not taking too much time from the overall schedule.
Agreed. And I feel like it would be better to start with them on the front end and then open it up to crafting the language to the entire body at the end, once we get to, a more concrete number of priorities. So I'm thinking of crafting it that way, and I will bring that to you guys and see where you're at on that. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. For subcommittees, would you consider non-legislative priority committee members to be on the subcommittees?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they have to be members of the actual committee.
Rachel, are you going to allow any kind of during these subcommittees? Do you perceive that's where we'll also receive public testimony, or is it going to be just kind of closed where just those members are going to chat amongst themselves to craft the language to come back?
So my thinking is that we would meet in our subcommittees, then have a block of testimony, go back to our subcommittees, and then have blocks of testimony. So we're not, we're breaking it up. We're not just sitting in, a subcommittee for an extended long period of time, but then we're also giving people different points throughout the day to give testimony because, maybe some people, they can come earlier than others. They are not able to make it until later in the evening. So I want to make sure and give plenty of opportunities for people who do want to come and testify, at different points in time during the day.
Are we going to be able to publish kind of a list of where we're at so that people know when they can come to do testimony on certain issues? Or is there a way for us to publish that I don't know,
I don't think
big
so.
screen somewhere? That way they would know, when to be there. So we're not wasting their time either, because they may be testifying on, other places too, like rules and stuff and platform. So I was just curious as to, has the convention committee submitted to you any way that where we can have a public place that people can go and look and see what's going on and estimate a time of when we're going to be talking about certain subjects?
I don't think so. And I think that would almost get into that territory of like blocking off and saying, okay, from this time to this time, we're going to talk about this subject. And then this time to this time, we're going to talk about this subject. Well, what if that person can't be there during that time? And so I don't think we should put limits on it, in that kind of way. It's almost kind of a first come, first serve is the most fair way that we can do it, I guess. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, Rachel, I think having some subcommittees makes a lot of sense. I think they've already done that on the resolutions committee. And I think, I've got a great passion for the phase out of the property tax and done a lot of study on that. And of course, Destin Sinsky actually who's on our committee, works for Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. So, at least we're a couple of people that are very interested in the property tax issue. And I think that's definitely one that will deserve to be in the top 8.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to do there, Ralph.
Yeah.
So then what I would suggest is if you have a topic that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, then please go ahead and submit that. So I can kind of start to see who's interested in what and figuring out a way that we could start to build those subcommittees then. Rolando, go ahead. Oh my.
So you envisioned, in other words, subcommittees for each topic. And how many subcommittees did you have in mind?
So I don't know that yet. And that was kind of something that I was hoping to glean from our discussion here of, how we might be able to break out those subcommittees.
Well, I think as I said before, I think based on the feedback we've gotten from the county and SDs, we already know, there's 5 or 6 issues that we already know, or at least I hope we do, that are going to be in the top 15. Just based on the overwhelming response from the county and SDs, property tax, Sharia, immigration, election integrity, we know those are going to be in the top 15. So I think we can already start working on drafting language for that, and that subcommittees can do that. There's going to be some other issues that are going to be more in the bubble. I think there's going to be a lot more. That's where the ranking and a lot of the debate is going to come in. But like what Ralph said, we already know property tax is going to be in the top 15. So we can have people working on the specific language for that. My passion is border and immigration, and I'm pretty sure we know that's going to be in the top 15. So we can start working. If those who are really into that issue can start working on language for that. So at least when we get there, early in the week, we already have some specific language, and we're not just groping in the dark. So for the 5 or 6 issues that we already know are going to be in the top 15, there's no reason why we can't have some ready-made language ready to go.
Agreed. And I think that will help us with those other items to have more time to dedicate to those other items that we're not sure about. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. So like I said, if you all would please go ahead and send me your interests, what the topics you're interested in serving on a subcommittee for, send that to the email thread, please, so I can keep it all in one place. Use the email thread for that, please. And we have 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure and get off at 7. So anything else very quickly? Richard?
Yeah, thank you. So on the email thread, do you want us to reply all, or you just want to send it to you?
You can just
Is
send
that-
it to me. It's fine, I think.
Okay, that'd fill up everybody's inboxes. I'm sure.
Yes, yes. All right. Anyone else before we sign off for this evening? And I also just want to remind everyone that we do have the Signal chat in there that we can use freely. And if there's anything that you feel like it needs to be documented, then please use the email thread. And other than that, I think we are good for this evening. If there are people who weren't able to get on tonight, from the committee, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what is going on, and we will see what we can do to try to correct that before our next meeting, which will be our final Zoom meeting before convention. So hopefully we're going to have some good things, boiling on the back burner by the time we meet next time.